my family first arrived in this country, it was in one of the most cliche manners possible, a boat. You see, my father was a part of Poland's merchant navy, and they happened to be near the shore of Texas when the Soviet Union declared martial law and dug their heels into the long-term occupation of Poland. This was an era of a highly partitioned world. The Iron Curtain clearly separating east from west. Borders were strict and clearly tangible. Anyone that fell outside of these strict barriers made the pilgrimage to large cities where jobs were readily available, such as New York, London, or Detroit, where I was born. You don't need to visit Michigan to know that Detroit's close to the border, but you do need to go there in order to understand the hardship that the area has gone through. From the riots and white flight of the 1960s to the auto industry bailout of 2008, each crisis has been turned around thanks to the efforts of local migrant communities. Asylees fleeing persecution and occupying forces. Each and every one of these groups has come together to Detroit, fixing our broken and stagnant communities in the metropolitan area, filling in the gaps with a wealth of outside knowledge, new perspectives, and innovation. This is done on the individual level, such as my father, who tirelessly perfected, up until his death, the heating and AC systems in some of the vehicles that you may all drive today. But it is also done on the community-wide level. Back in 2017, a former convent turned safe haven, Freedom House Detroit, was dealing with the announcement that the Department of Housing and Urban Development, otherwise known as HUD, would be completely cutting the new organization from the new administration's budget. This organization provides temporary refuge and social services to victims of human trafficking and asylum seekers. And HUD provided about 60% of their budget outside of financial donations. This loss threatened the shutdown of the organization. Incoming asylum seekers would be limited to even fewer resources. Upon hearing this, however, local communities, native-born and foreign-born alike, mobilized together with restaurant fundraisers, benefit concerts, and local campaigns to raise enough money for Freedom House Detroit to continue their work into the next year. Together, we outraised the expected amount. Freedom House Detroit could continue their work into the next year without even needing to rely on HUD at all. And on top of this, HUD even reversed their decision and gave back their financial allocation to them. What was once a hopeless situation was turned around thanks to the hard work of migrants reaching across communities and working together with native-born advocates for a worthy cause. Despite these gains for the Detroit community, however, the future of migration is under attack by anti-globalist movements that are disseminating xenophobic and nativist messages. National borders are becoming as rigid as they were during the Cold War, and foreign-born residents are being deported back to countries that they may not have seen for decades. How can this happen in a world that has become smaller than ever? And what will happen if we continue this trend of restricting interstate movement by 2030? Will we only be able to visit our families via Skype or hologram? Will we have global firms? Will they only be able to work with their international teams through virtual reality conference rooms? How could we ever regain the lost knowledge and culture of societies that are at risk of dying out? And most importantly, how could we ever revitalize our broken communities without the outside perspectives necessary to do so? Although for a short period, we would be able to substitute actual movement with technology, this does nothing to protect us from the danger that global isolation brings. At best, our communities will become more stagnant and insulated than ever. International organizations will have to learn how to operate in silos. And at worst, we have no external recourse if our national government strips us of our civil liberties and internal conflict breaks out. Yet, if these xenophobic movements lose power as quickly as it was collected, imagine the progress and possibilities that we could accomplish by 2030 and beyond. Moving past the idea of citizenship being tied to only one or two states, imagine the potential for upward mobility and economic innovation if residency and movement was less restricted and citizenship didn't tie one to the place they were born. States and legislators would work harder to understand the needs of their constituents and make their jurisdictions a better place to live, if that meant retaining more taxpayers. Areas suffering from declining population levels could be rejuvenated by incoming migrant populations. Generally, a world that fosters integration and freedom of movement is one that keeps our better interests in check. And contrary to mainstream perception, migration is a great stabilizer. We may not solve the displacement crisis by 2030, yet, if we are able to take back the right to free movement globally within the next 10 years, then we are well on our way to repairing our broken communities. Thank you.